Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans, a place where all we do is try to find the coolest places in the world to fly over, best scenery in the world, most interesting spots to check out, and I spend a couple days learning as much as I can about what we'll be seeing on the ground to give you your own personal guided tour, just to give you one more reason to get up in the air again and again. We've got another viewer recommendation today, and may even be a quasi-hometown flyover, which I would know if I thought to ask, but another shout out to Mike Coffey, longtime channel member, an all-around cool guy, who I'm totally guessing here probably lives somewhere around where we are. And as you probably guessed by the title, we are going to enjoy our second trip up in Canada today, and one of the biggest challenges with this country is that it is massive, as you probably know, and has a relatively sparse population, so we don't have a whole lot of options. But he recommended that I check out Whistler, which I did, and it looks awesome. And there were some cool add-ons available, so we're going to take a little short hop over there so we can enjoy it together. And as you can see, I finally found an excuse to grab the most recent object of my heart's desire, and that is this neat little vintage plane, the 333 Riviera by Mario Noriega Desings. And this plane has actually been out for a couple weeks, and I was wondering why the heck none of the regular crew had done any reviews yet. And then I hopped on YouTube this morning, and sure enough, Angel had done one. So if you want to check out a more in-depth review, you can cruise on over there. Our girl has done it again. And I agree with her. It's a very cool plane. For a plane that costs, I don't know, maybe around $12 US, I thought it was cool. I mean, it's not super complex, and I'm not going to give a full review here. As you can see, sometimes, you know, when they have these angles here, it's not, but it flies really cool, and it flies like it probably does, and it's got some kind of intricacies that I really like. And outside of this stuff right here next to us, everything looks pretty good down here on the dash area. So let me go ahead and get it started up. All right, I got the fuel on. We got to turn the battery on. Let's start with that, and then turn the pump on low. We'll let our GPS get fired up. And we got all our mixtures and everything good. All right, go ahead and turn this on, get the mags going. And that should be it. Let's go ahead and turn our outside temperature to that there. Get everything turned on here, on. Get the old transponder on. All right, I think we're in pretty good shape here. The starter turns off by itself. I like it. And as Angel mentioned on her channel, the only thing that's a little bit weird is that thing is vibrating like crazy. So we just won't look at that because it's a slightly disturbing sight. And this says if you just start it on the runway, and I didn't read the full-blown manual, but if you just start it on the runway, it starts with the flaps at 30 degrees, which is several notches down, but I'm just going to go ahead and go with 10 because it worked perfectly fine when I did that last time. All right, get the GPS going. And we're in pretty good shape. So this plane is cool. I love all vintage planes, as you probably know. But this one just has that, especially from the outside, that super retro look, which I just adore. All right, let's get going here. And I'm going to set our altitude. We're going to have to do a lot of climbing. The whole flight distance is, I think, like 40 miles. But because we're going to have to do a lot of climbing, as you can probably imagine, it'll still be a short hop, but a little longer than it would be if we were just doing a straight flight. And one of the things when you turn this plane, because as you can see on the ends of the wings, it's got those big floats that are in the elevated position now. It can tip a little bit easy, which is probably very realistic, and I like that too. I do have a freeware add-on installed for this airport, but there's just not much out here. It did improve the look of the runway, and I think may have even added a hangar that you can drive into if you want, although I didn't try it. And then we're going to go and land on a lake, of course, and I got an add-on for that. This is actually the second add-on I installed for the water landing place. It was supposed to make like a little dock and a little building on the dock, but the first one I put in didn't work. There was a little house there, but it was floating about 1.5 feet above the water, so I took that one out, put a second one in, also freeware, which I've linked both of these in the description, and we'll check that out. Other than that, there are no scenery packs for this area, but it looks pretty cool, as you're going to see once we get out there. All right, I'm going to have to get real slow before I turn around down here. This thing might just tip on its side. And the first few times I landed it, I could not figure out how to get the water floats down from the side, and it immediately just stuck one of the wings in the water, and I couldn't get it back out. And then I realized you actually have to manually manipulate the little water float release down there, so we'll do that. All right, go real slow, real nice and easy. Slowly turn it, easy. We don't want to scrape the floats or anything else. Look at this scenery. Amazing. Yeah, you can see there's not much going on at this airport, but they did clean up the paint on the runway and stuff like that a little bit, I think. I may just be saying that, but it was freeware, so I'm not complaining about anything. All right, so let's set the altitude real quick. Get that going. We'll go right to 8,000, which will be just right. And there's going to be some power lines right when we get over the runway here, so just a heads up with that. Our altitude starting isn't all that high, so you don't have to pull the mixture back much when you're starting if you pull it back at all. And this also has a reverse, but I think I did see somewhere that you have to have the pitch in the feather position to use it. Well, it says you do, so if you're on the water and you're trying to go backwards, which is kind of nice, you just pull that little lever. Just make sure your pitch is in the feather position before you do that. Or I don't know what could happen. Okay, let's see how all this stuff's looking here. All right, everything looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's get going. This is a neat plane because it flies just a little bit different, and obviously it's a pusher configuration. The prop is back behind us. But I like when, as I've mentioned before, you know, a lot of the single-engine planes, it doesn't really matter what you're flying all that much. You can't tell too much of a difference. But this one you can tell. It's a little bit different flying it, which is cool. Looks like we got a couple 172s over there on the runway. I think those were also part of the add-on because I don't have any plane or ground traffic for planes, static traffic down there. Alright, let's watch out for these power lines. That's the first thing I'm going to try to avoid. Get the gears up. What little gears there are. And it's neat, if you watch the outside animation, they kind of fold up and then get enclosed in the hull, I guess. Really cool. And we'll look out the window, of course, when we lower the floats. Alright, that's on vertical speed. We'll go to 1,000. Alright, we should be good to go. Kind of a weird little altitude alarm. I guess we should probably turn the generator on before the battery dies. Okay, we're good. All the lights are on, pitot heat's on, and I don't think this plane is made for flying through really cold weather. Let's go ahead and... I don't know why it keeps saying altitude. Maybe I need to push arm. Let's do that. There we go. Alright. I'm trying to figure this out too, guys. It's all trial and error. But he stopped saying that in that very 1950s robot voice, so we should be good. Alright, I need to remember to pull the mixture back just a little bit as we go along. We can get the pitch back down in the green zone, get the throttle in the green zone. And I think we're configured pretty good. Get our flaps all the way up. Now we're configured right. Whew. Boy, that's a lot, but like I said, I like it. Alright, everything's good. We're in good shape. And it's got a little water rudder that we'll want to make sure that we pull down when we get out there. Over the water. So we are up in British Columbia, about 75 miles north of Vancouver. The town we left from is Pemberton, and the code for that airport we just took off from is Charlie Yankee Papa Sierra. And I should add that it is home of the Whistler Skydiving Company, if you're into that kind of thing. And you don't need to have any experience with jumping. For 395 Canadian dollars, you can enjoy being very tightly strapped to the loins of a seasoned pro as you leap from their Cessna 182, which I checked out on their website. Very cool. And for another $95, they'll record the whole experience for you. And speaking of seasoned pros, I often enjoy watching videos of flight training where the students are just slamming the plane down the runway, as I'm sure all of you do too. And the last one I was watching, I just couldn't help but notice how totally cool these instructors are as these guys are doing this, and girls. And some of the instructors are girls too, of course. And I just can't even imagine the kind of temperament that must be required to be a flight instructor. I don't think you could pay me enough to do that job, but I sure am glad there are plenty of people willing to do it. And this area here is the native turf of the Lilwat First Nation, whose remnants are now concentrated in a little area called Mount Currie, north of the airport, which is not a mountain at all. And speaking from personal experience only, whenever you find a place that's not a mountain that's called Mount anything, well, it's usually not where you'd find the Prada store. But back before the Europeans arrived in the mid-1800s and carved a bunch of horse trails through the hills here, everyone got around via canoe. As they cruised between these two big local lakes to fish and hunt down this little river underneath us, which I think is called the Green River, although I'm not certain about that either. And the one back behind us, the big lake that we won't see because it was behind us all the way, is called Lillooet. And the one we're going to be landing on, up by Whistler up here, is called Green Lake. And though I couldn't find it on the satellite map, and you know I looked for it, there's supposedly a ghost town back there on Lillooet, which was used by miners during the Fraser Canyon Gold Rush in the 1850s. And just a quick note about the weather, this is not live. I tried live, but it was still mostly green until you get up in the mountain peaks. And unfortunately, there were some spots down by the river here with flat trees, and the snow took care of that. So unless you like looking at flat trees, turn on the snow. And put the depth to at least 15 inches if you want to be sure you cover all those little boo-boos. So again, I think this is the Green River. Google didn't have a name on top of it, but I looked at some... well, that was weird. What was that? Must have been some of the ghosts from the ghost town back there. There were some companies along the river that had place names, and on their websites they mentioned they're along the Green River, so that's what I'm going with. There's a couple of interesting sites down here. One of them is actually a speedway, which is down there to the left. It's actually just behind us now, but you can't see it because of the snow. And there's another spot called the Mystery Creek Geosite, which also can't be seen even without the snow, but you know there was absolutely zero chance of me overlooking a place with a name like that. And all I could really find out about it was from a travel blog post, and I'm always so grateful that people post those because sometimes you wouldn't know anything about a spot that was less popular unless someone did that. But according to the author, it sounds like it's a little patch of house-sized boulders. And as oppressive as that would be all by itself, the author said that the nearest potential location from whence they came is over 3 kilometers away. And they all came to rest down in that one spot down there. And I was just thinking to myself, can you imagine? They said it happened about 3,000 years ago, they think. But can you imagine seeing a house-sized boulder rolling down these hills? That would be a sight to behold. I'd pay good money to see that. Probably even more than being strapped to a skydiving instructor. Alright, once we get up to altitude, we'll get a real nice look at Whistler and all of its ski slopes. Can't see much here because, well, there we go. Just above the glare shield there, you can start to see it. And of course, we're going to fly all over that stuff. But one thing you'll also notice out here, much unlike the Alps, I didn't notice any popping. There's a little bit of stretching on the mountains. But there's a giant, the world's largest hydro dam is out just a little bit east of Geneva. There's several dams actually, but the largest in the world of its type is out there. And there's even an add-on pack for it that was payware. It was like $8, but you know I love dams and I'm willing to pay $8 for that. But I went out there to check it out, and the popping is just so bad out there. It's a real distraction, and I just can't stomach it, so I didn't get the pack, and we're going to forego that until they can fix that, if they ever can. But we won't see any of that out here, thank goodness. In just a second when we turn, alright, we're almost at our altitude, we're going to see Green Lake, which is where we're landing. Once we take this turn, we'll spot it out the right here. Alright, we don't want to stall, so we've gained some altitude. Let's pull our mixture back. I'm not paying enough attention. Too busy taking in the sights. That's not it. There it is right there. That big one is where we're going to come in. And the little spot that should be modified is right around here, so we'll come in this way and then have to turn around because I want to go look and see if they did that little water base up just right. Which will be fun. Okay, thank you. Alright, I'm going to actually bring our ascent speed down to, we're almost there, so let's cut that down because we were real close to stalling, I bet you. We don't want to do that. Alright, this should even us out once we get there. Now this is odd. Maybe I didn't turn something on here because that's not indicating... There we go. Alright. Not that we need it on autopilot, but it's good to see it. Alright, we're learning, guys. We're figuring it out. Alright, everything else looks good. We're in the air. That's the important part for now. And let's go ahead and set this. This will make it static for our exhaust temperature. If I can... There we go. Alright, that'll help with that. Okay. So here's Whistler. We're about to fly over it now, and there's one set of their ski slopes, and the other one is right over here. Let's pull that back a little bit so we don't overspeed. Alright. Like I said, this plane's a handful, and I love it. So obviously this town has a very strange name, and it was applied informally at first by some Brits with the Royal Navy, who were the first to survey this area in the 1860s. And it is a reference to the call of a creature called the hoary marmot, which of course I had to check out because I'd never seen that before, and I'm not sure I'd ever even seen a marmot before. And it looks kind of like a mashup of a beaver, an otter, and a raccoon. And due in no small part to the massive ski complex, this place receives about 2 million visitors each year, which I am sure is not lamented by the roughly 14,000 permanent residents. Look how great that looks. These little bridges down here look good. All of them look good. That looks a little funky, but you know how rivers are running down a mountain. And if that's the only thing that looks funky, I'm not complaining. And even without the snow on, this area looks really good. It was just the area going down by those mountains, down by the river that had the flat trees. Up until the 1960s, this area was known as Alta Lake, a true blue backwater without any kind of basic infrastructure. No power, no running water, nothing. And then by the end of the 1960s, this region caught the eye of a few forward-thinking rich guys who decided to start building it up in hopes of making it the site of the 1968 Winter Olympics, which they failed to achieve, despite trying again in 1978. But they finally got their wish in 2010 as the local... Well, it wasn't local. They had the Olympics, if you recall, down in Vancouver then, but they used all the slopes up here for the mountain events. And my hunch is that those guys probably weren't around to enjoy that party. So this one here is Whistler Mountain, and then this one here, I think the highest peak is called the Spearhead, which must be maybe that back there. And they've got some glaciers up there. And the weather around here during the summertime isn't too bad. The average temp in July and August is around mid-70s. And then it gets down in the low 10s during the wintertime. And their coldest ever recorded temperature was around -20. Alright, once we come around the top of Whistler here, which we can already start to see, this little spot right here, this is an in-sim add-on. And that's called the Cloud Raker Sky Bridge. And this thing is incredible. It is a very narrow pedestrian suspension bridge. And even that title may be a bit overzealous. If you check it out online, which you should, I think you'll agree a better description might be just rope bridge. And for $90, you can crap your pants all the way across that thing over to Raven's Eye Outlook, which is on this peak right across from it. So here's Raven's Eye, and then there's that tiny, tiny little suspension bridge. And it's a lot more jagged than this. You know how mountain peaks are in the sim, they kind of round them out. Look at that thing. Good grief. I'd pay $90 to go up there. No doubt about it. And although they're not modeled in the sim, there are at least 5 gondola lines crisscrossing this area. And I think you may need to first take a gondola and then a chairlift to get up to that sky bridge. I could be wrong about that, but I was trying to trace out the route on their little site brochure, and that appears to be the case. And I should also mention that I saw in that brochure that one of their ski trails is called Dapper's Delight, which would be an incredible name for a swing band. Alright, we need to start coming down now because we got a long way to go, so let's go ahead and cut the throttle. Set our altitude at, let's go for 3,000. And we'll come down at about 1,000 feet a minute. If we can manage that, we'll cut our pitch back. And we'll just coast on down. And there's one gondola line that goes all the way from somewhere around here to right over here. And this is called Blackcomb Mountain, this one over here. And there's a glacier over here by the same name. And there's another glacier back in this area, back behind that peak, called Spearhead Glacier. So they got some glaciers up there if you're into that kind of thing. But look at this. These ski slopes look incredible. And you can see how that looks a little bit funny. Obviously, rivers don't usually run uphill. But we get that everywhere. We see that in the sim. But this is a neat area. We haven't flown over any, not this close anyway, to any ski resorts yet on this channel. And this is definitely a good jumping off point because this looks amazing. Got a little lodge up there. And there's some other little lodges. I don't know if you caught them or not. We were coming around the side. Down in that area, there's a little one right there. Beautiful. So obviously they have skiing, snowboarding, snowmobiling. In the summertime, I think they do a lot of trail bike riding up in here. So because we have to lose so much altitude, we're going to come and land over here, but we're going to come out this way, circle around as we lose altitude, and I need to remember to stop at about 5,500 feet or we're not going to clear this mountain over here. So I need to be mindful of that. And as we circle around on this end over here, there's a spot down in the woods that's going to be underneath us, which unfortunately we won't be able to see because it's under the trees, but it's called a train wreck. And of course I had to check that out. And if you Google train wreck Whistler, you'll probably be able to find it. And there's all kinds of cool pictures of the mangled boxcars down there, now covered with graffiti, but very creepy nonetheless. Alright, let me just get ready to flatten out here. I don't want to miss that because I really don't want to hit the mountain. Look at the town down there. Well, that must be a hot spring down there because I got a little grass going around it. Beautiful. Really beautiful. Okay, we'll flatten out here. And then once we clear this little ridge, we'll start coming down again. But apparently, going back to that train wreck, that happened in 1958 when a train derailed after coming around a turn with a little too much pedal on the metal. And so they hired a local logging company to move the wreck off the tracks with their heavy lifting gear, usually used for logs, but they're using it for boxcars this time. And instead of carving it up and hauling it away, they just rolled it down the hill, leaving the remains for tourists to gawk at 6 years later, and spray paint. Totally covered with graffiti. But it's all, the trees and stuff have all grown up around it, so you kind of just walk through the woods, and let's see, it would be, we're not quite over yet. I'll show you where it would be, and I'll show you on the satellite map at the end, of course, where it is too. Unfortunately, you can't even see it on the satellite map. It's really buried in the trees, but you got to check that out online. It looks really cool. All right, we'll pick up the pace a little bit here since we're flattened out. Till we make this turn, then we'll start coming down again once we clear these mountains. But getting back to the cold weather, I don't know if I mentioned it on one of our previous flights. And we've done enough now that I'm like an old man. I keep telling the same stories over and over again. But if I didn't mention it before, you know, I lived in Buffalo for a while, served my time, I like to say, in Buffalo. 1 year up there, Buffalo, New York, which is just as miserable as you can probably imagine in the wintertime. Very nice in the summer and spring and fall, though. Wintertime, which lasts from like October to May, not so fun. But we went out to Breckenridge for Christmas a couple years ago, and that was the coldest absolute temperature I've ever experienced. One of the mornings when we came out there, it was negative 10 degrees. And I don't know if I'd ever actually experienced sub-zero temperatures before. And you know what it's like if you've lived out there, but if you haven't, it was so cold that all the snot in my nose immediately froze. It was just, I was like, what is going on? I mean, it was like painful, like instant, the second I walked out there. And so luckily I had packed an excessive amount of skiing gear, and I had like the face mask and everything on. And even with my gloves and my hand warmers and my gloves, my fingers were still getting numb. It was very, very cold. All right, so the train wreck is right in this area right here. Down in the woods, there's some little trails that go into it. So I don't know where the train track was, or even if they're still here before they rolled them down the hill, but I'm guessing it probably kind of came through here and then just rolled them down off that way. But you don't see things like that very often, and it definitely looked cool online, so check that out if you'd like. And I'll tell you one more story that I don't think I've shared about Buffalo, just because it's a great story. And you know what else I did a great job with around here? All the power lines, especially once we land. If we look over this way, which of course we will, there's some great little power lines up on the hill, but the sim usually does a great job with that stuff. And before I get to my other Buffalo story, there's some more power lines. You know, I've been complaining about all of my steam gauge versions of the planes, like the Caravan and the Baron and the King Air, not working properly. The nav systems weren't working. And I kept pulling everything out of my community folder to see what was going on, and I think I figured out what the problem is if you're having the same issue. I had installed that TDS GTN XI, which is kind of like a separate app, and I pulled that out, and now everything's working again. So if you're having that problem and you've got that installed, and I don't know if I need to get an update for it or what, but I hardly ever use it anyway, so I just pulled it completely out and that fixed it. So if you're experiencing that, that may help you out. Keep coming down. We can't get the floats out until, as it says right here, 108 knots. So we're going to have to get down to flap zone before we pull our floats out. So once we level out here at around 3,000, because we got to clear this thing, I'll get those floats going. So when I was up in Buffalo, I spent 1 full year there. Arrived in January of 99, I think. Left in January of 2000. And at the time, I was working for Black & Decker, who I think I mentioned in our Space Coast flight. And I was in charge of the whole Home Depot channel up there. All right, let's start leveling out a little bit here, so we can get down to flap speed. And one morning, I used to go out and load my DeWalt truck up every day before heading out to the Home Depot store. So I went out there with just jeans and a polo shirt on, which is what I wore when I was in the stores. And I realized after I loaded my truck up, and this was in probably maybe November, it had snowed a ton and it was freezing, but I'd locked myself out of my house. So I figured what I would do is, because I lived in kind of a rough neighborhood, which was good for cheap rent, but not so great for knocking on people's doors. I figured I'd walk to the Black & Decker service center, because they own DeWalt power tools, and I would just use their phone there, because I left my cell phone and everything inside, to see if I could call the landlord to get a key to get inside. And as I was walking out there, let me get our floats down now that we can do that. See him coming down here. And we'll get some flaps down too. And it said go to, if you got the floats out, they said go down to about 30 degrees of flaps. So we'll do that. Cut our throttle. And as I was walking to the Black & Decker Service Center, I mean, I was walking in Buffalo, if you've lived there, the snowbanks are like chest deep when those plows come through. So I was wading through these snowbanks, freezing cold. It was blizzard going, walking about, I don't know, a mile and a half, very slowly, as you can imagine, trudging through those in a polo shirt. People were driving around, honking at me, and I was just like, this is the worst thing I can imagine. And then I got one of those cold weather nosebleeds that was so bad that blood was like pouring out of my mouth and everything. And so when I finally got to the Black & Decker Service Center, the customers in there were like horrified, and it was quite a sight. Terrible, terrible. And that's the day that I called Black & Decker and told them I was quitting and moved back down to Florida. That was quite an experience. But you kind of earn some street cred when you say you've lived in Buffalo and been through something like that. All right, okay, looks like they got the dock down there. See it to the right? Well, that's a lot better than what we had before, so that's cool. And this plane will hop like crazy. Like crazy, so we need to try to be almost stalling when we hit that water. And the animation's kind of cool too, as you'll see it splashes up in front of the windscreen there. It's great. Let's see if we can just get her down nice and easy. Get our mixture all the way back in. We probably should have done that before. I was too busy thinking about my horrors of Buffalo. Alright, come on baby, don't nosedive. See that spray come up there? Very cool. And let's get the flaps up. And we'll kick our rudder on. Didn't want to rip that off when we came down, but now we're going to need it. Look at those little houses over there. This is just beautiful, isn't it? Amazing. Alright, you think we're slow enough to turn around? Let's try it. And as you can see, we've got our anchor ready to throw right through the window, which of course we'll do once we get out there. Yeah, but I'm not a big fan of cold weather. I've lived in Florida now for 23 years, so when it gets down to the low 50s, I'm bundling up and trying not to even go outside. And we just had our first cold snap here in Jacksonville. It got down to upper 50s last night, so I was really grieving that. Ooh, and it looks like over here to the left we got a little frozen lake creeping over. Fantastic. Ooh, do we need to use taxi lights on the waterway? Well, let's just put them on, just in case. See those power lines over there? Up there on the top, and then they run down here. I don't know why, I really love that. I've always enjoyed it. So if you're into amphibious planes, if you're into vintage planes, and for 12 bucks or whatever this thing costs, I would definitely say it's worth it. I like it a lot. And because it's not super, super detailed, as you can see with this stuff over here, you can turn the graphics up pretty high, which I did, and I always love that too. But you have to get this. It's not in the InSim marketplace yet. You have to get it from AnyBuild's store. All right, let me look out the window here. I don't know where the... Okay, I think that's it over there. Man, we've even got some rolling waves here. Man, I don't recall ever seeing that in the sim, where you actually dip inside the waves there. Totally cool. All right, is that it there? I think I need to come around this second... Yeah, we need to come around this second little horn here. And just for fun, we'll feather the prop and use the reverse once we get out there. Try not to plow into the dock. Look at this. You can actually see the rolling waves. Look at that. Amazing. Although I don't think on a lake like this they'd be rolling like that, but I'm glad to see it. Have you guys ever seen that in the sim before? I don't do much open water landing on the ocean, so I guess I probably would have noticed it. No, that's not it. Alright. Well, hopefully it's not frozen in. It didn't look like it when we were coming in. We'll see. So a nice setting for the clouds if you're not wanting to fly through a bunch of them. I have the cloud set at 3,700 feet. This is the few cloud setting. And again, unless you want to look at the sketchy looking trees down by that river there, set the snow to about 15 inches. Okay, I think that's it. Just off. What's going... I don't know where I am. I don't know what's going on here. Alright, well... I don't think this thing's an icebreaker. Okay, well... That's how we're going to do it. Alright, I'm going to get out of the drone, and go look at this. Because I want to go see that thing, but we just beached it. So we're going to have to get one of those logging companies to come pick us up off this island here. All right, well, let's just shut her all down and call for help. Yeah. All right, let's get in the drone real quick because I just want to take a look at that, and then we'll look at little nav map as usual. Oh, it's way over here. All right, when I came out here last time, this was not... Well, maybe it was. Maybe it was. Maybe that thing was out there. I just didn't come around far enough. All right, well, call the loggers. All right, let's see this thing. And this is a freeware add-on pack. If you don't install that, of course, that'll be included in our video description, the link for that. If you don't install that, this won't be here. Oh, that looks cool. Real cool. Look at the Canadian flag waving. Oh, Canada. They got a little seaplane there. That is awesome. Little tires up against the side of it. Well, I don't know what's more embarrassing, me beaching the plane like that or me slamming into the side of the dock, which I probably would have also done. Very neat. And if there's no snow on there, it is a boardwalk. I saw the thumbs and it was a boardwalk. All right, well, that's amazing. Okay, I was hoping to use my picture of me parked next to the dock for my thumbnail, so I think I'll skip the thumbnail of me crashed onto the beach here. But all right, let's bring over a little nav map. Just go humble myself for a second. There we go. Way to go, Nick. Way to go. Nice landing. Okay, let's pull this over. All right. So as always, here's where we are in the world. There's Vancouver down here. And by the way, I think I am going to go ahead and do that Vancouver flight. I was kind of complaining about the way some of the buildings look down here. But there's a lot to see, and there's a lot of stuff that's been done up. So I think there's an add-on pack that I've got for that. It's a payware, and there's a lot of freeware too, so we'll add it all in there. So here's Pemberton. And here's Mount Curry, by the way, if you want to go check that out. So this is where most of the Indians are residing today, unfortunately for them. And then here's that big lake, and I think right around here is where the ghost town might be. I'm just totally guessing, right down here. Because they said there's about 6 buildings in it, and that looks like that's probably what it is. Because you'd think if they were like beachfront residences now, these days, someone would be... I mean, if you're going to live that close to the water, why not live on the water, right? So that might be where the ghost town is, but I'm not sure because there was no place marker indicating that. All right, so there's where we took off from. Came down here, and if you're in the daytime and you can see down on the ground, I think you can see that little speedway there, so that's where that is. And then here's where the Mystery Creek geosite is. Look at the size of some of these rocks. And you really can't get a sense of scale. Well, look, there's a car there. Look at the size of that one. That is awesome. There's a place up in Ledyard, Connecticut, when I lived up there called the Boulder Train that looks kind of like that, but that was formed when a glacier came up and just stopped after pushing all the huge boulders out in front of it. But these all rolled down from somewhere. And they said they think it's somewhere like maybe up here because it would have had to come down, like break off a ledge somewhere. So can you imagine something that big rolling down there like that? Holy smokes. All right, so there's Green Lake. We flew over that, came up here, and I'll show you the sky bridge up at the top of Whistler Mountain. You can just barely see it here on little nav map. See that? And then here's that little lookout is over here. And I don't see any of the gondola wires, but I guess you probably wouldn't. But there's one that runs all the way across here to the top of this place. So there's a giant gondola line that runs this way. And these are some of the glaciers. This is the Spearhead Glacier over here. And this is the Backcomb over here. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong mountain. Here's the glaciers over here. I think that was the Spearhead Glacier, and then Backcomb's over here. So the gondola line runs all the way across here. Can you imagine that? And then, if you want to see it, of course, there's Dapper's Delight. So if you're visiting, you better check out that slope, because I bet it's incredible. Got a little guy playing a big bass fiddle up there. His hair all done up. And then here's where the train wreck is, which unfortunately we can't see, but it's right down in here, and you've got to check out some pictures of that online. Looked really cool. And other than the absolutely stunning landscape that we saw, that's it. Great flight, great plane, great graphics, great weather, everything about it. Totally awesome. Had an absolute blast as usual. Hope you guys will check this flight out. Had a lot of fun. Can't wait to see y'all again in the skies. Later.